to dream remodels. Reviews, pricing, and booking are at Angie.com or on the Angie app. And from Aspiration, working to help people combat climate change with a credit card that lets them plant a tree with every purchase. One card, zero carbon footprint. Aspiration.com/credit. Aspiration Financial, LLC. Millions remain in limbo about the future of their student debt. President Biden has canceled some of it for some people, and although his new budget is over 100 pages long, there's no mention of student loan forgiveness. Student debt behind them. Next time on 1A. Supported by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, presenting the Out of the Darkness Overnight Walk on June 4th from dusk till dawn. One night, one goal, stop suicide. Register now at theovernight.org.
It's WNYC. The Takeaway is next on 93.9 FM. If you're listening on AM 820, up next it's the BBC News Hour. Tonight, a chance of light rain. It'll probably start after midnight. We'll have a low of about 42 degrees this evening. And then tomorrow, light rain possible early. It'll probably intensify through the day. We'll see some fog tomorrow as well. Otherwise, cloudy, and it's going to be pretty warm. We'll have a high tomorrow of about 66 degrees. Wind gusts tomorrow up to about 22 miles an hour. It's WNYC at 3 o'clock.
This is WNYC, FM, HD, and AM, New York.
Welcome to News Hour. It's live from the BBC World Service. I'm Tim Franks in London, and Lise Doucette is in Kyiv.
Today, Russian shelling continues despite Moscow's pledge to dramatically reduce its military operations here.
Lise will bring you postcards of life in Kyiv throughout the programme. We'll hear also from a former Ukrainian Prime Minister and from a resident of the southern city of Mariupol, forcibly deported, she says, to Russia.
It was really, really scary. It was minus 20 outside, and we drove through minefields.
Also, is Facebook failing to stem climate misinformation? And is Pakistan's Prime Minister about to be booted out of office? Those stories and others after the news.
Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet has said widespread and indiscriminate Russian attacks have plunged the people of Ukraine into a living nightmare. She told the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva that Russia may have committed war crimes. Moscow's representative in the council accused the Ukrainian military of using civilians as human shields. Here's Imogen Folks.
UN human rights officers have evidence Russian forces have used cluster munitions in populated areas in Ukraine at least 24 times. There have been 77 attacks on healthcare centers. Homes, schools, water and electricity supplies have also been hit. Ms. Bachelet also expressed her concern at videos in which prisoners of war appear to be violently interrogated, and at allegations some Ukrainians have been forcibly evacuated to Russia.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has again spoken to President Biden, seeking further military support as Russia continues its attacks against his country. On Tuesday, Moscow promised to reduce its military activity in two northern regions, and Ukraine said some Russian forces have been withdrawing, but fighting has continued elsewhere. Jeremy Bone is in Kyiv.
The Russians appear to have given up any idea of taking the capital or even encircling it, but the sound of artillery is rumbling across the city. Like the president and every Ukrainian I've spoken to, the mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, believes the Russian statements about reducing their military operations were never believable. longer-term war of attrition is developing, and neither side is ready to give the other the concessions that would be necessary to create a lasting ceasefire.
The Kremlin has played down the idea that Tuesday's peace talks in Turkey resulted in any breakthrough. President Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the positive aspect of them had been that Ukraine had started to formulate its proposals on paper. He said this represented a new development. The Hubble Space Telescope has set a new record for capturing a picture of a single distant star. The light from the giant sun has taken 12.9 billion years to reach us. Astronomers have called it Morning Star in Old English, Irundel. Here's Jonathan Amos.
The veteran Hubble Space Telescope is still making remarkable discoveries, and this latest one is particularly smart. Even with its large mirror, Hubble shouldn't be able to pick out individual stars at a time when the universe was only 6% of its current age. They're too far away. But Hubble exploited a natural zoom lens in the sky. It takes the form of a great cluster of galaxies in the line of sight, which then bends and magnifies the light of more distant objects behind.
BBC News.
And you're listening on WMIC in New York. I'm Sean Carlson. New York Governor Kathy Hochul and legislative leaders continue to privately negotiate a state budget that is due on Friday. One of the many outstanding issues is Hochul's push to rebrand and extend a tax break for New York City's housing developers. The 421A program is set to expire in June. Hochul wants to replace it with a similar tax incentive, but Democratic lawmakers say it's a giveaway to wealthy real estate interests. Vasha Gerhardt of the Real Estate Board
taking a tool away doesn't help us get anywhere closer to where we need to be in terms of meeting that crisis.
Progressive activists want to see that the tax break replaced with direct housing vouchers to tenants. The Environmental Protection Agency has announced a new senior advisor for equity to serve the New York and New Jersey region. Olivia Glenn most recently served as Deputy Commissioner of Environmental Justice and Equity for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. It took Camden Environmental Hero staff for the EPA's Region 2 office, which serves New Jersey, New York, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Indian nations. This evening will have about 42 degrees. And then tomorrow, a chance of light rain through the day. It'll probably intensify through the day. We'll have some patchy fog in the morning. Otherwise, cloudy tomorrow. It's going to get pretty warm. High near 66 in the afternoon with more showers and possibly even thunderstorms tomorrow night. Low 54 degrees. We'll see gusts tomorrow night up to about 21 miles an hour. It's 42. Sunny right now in New York City at 306.
Welcome to NewsHour. It's live from the BBC of London with me, Tim Franks. Most of us, thankfully, will never know what it's like to live in a country invaded, a country at war. Today, we're getting a special insight courtesy of our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, who's been based in Kyiv since the start of the year. We'll hear from her throughout the programme. First, though, the latest appeal for an end to the violence and the terror. Speaking today in Geneva, the UN Human Rights Commissioner Michelle Bachelet said that Russia's indiscriminate attacks on populated areas of Ukraine may amount to war crimes.
For more than 1 month now, the entire population of Ukraine has been enduring a living nightmare. The lives of millions of people are in upheaval as they are forced to flee their homes or hide in basements and bomb shelters as their cities are pummeled and destroyed. The hostilities must stop without delay. Today I call on the Russian Federation to heed the clear and strong calls of the General Assembly and immediately act to withdraw its troops from Ukrainian territory.
Russia, though, shows no sign of heeding that call, despite its announcement yesterday that it would be scaling down operations in parts of Ukraine, as Lise Doucette has been finding out in the capital, Kyiv.
Well, it's the 35th day of war. The first day, though, after Russia said it would drastically reduce its military operations around this capital and the city of Chernihiv to the north. But the air raid sirens still sounded before first light, and they have kept wailing across the city throughout the day. And the boom of artillery fire on the outskirts reverberates across this city. I can still hear it now. Throughout this invasion, we've often asked, is this capital really in Moscow's sights? Could Russia encircle the city? Could it take it militarily, politically? And I have to say there were moments early in this invasion when many of us thought a Russian siege, incessant shelling, was just a matter of time. So far, Kyiv has been largely spared. Damaged in the suburbs, flattened on the outskirts, saddened by shocking scenes in other towns and cities. Let's just listen to a snapshot of a city which still stands on a war footing. You never know what you're going to see on the streets of Kyiv today. And all of a sudden, you see people gathering around the statues, filling up sandbags, and protecting the monuments. Even as there was a message from Moscow that from now on the priority would be in eastern Ukraine, to Moscow's words, to liberate it. I'm with my colleague, my Ukrainian colleague, Anna Chornosa. Anna, you know everything about Kyiv and your country. Which these statues that are in front of us, soaring into the sky, in front of the magnificent St. Michael's Monastery?
Well, in the middle, there is Princess Olga. She was a ruler in Kiev Rus. We also have, to the left from her, it's St. Andrew, one of the apostles. Because the legend says that he came to this land and showed his hand and said, here there will be a beautiful city with many churches, which is where Kiev, which there is today, known as Kyiv.
Ukrainians love their statues. Everywhere we go, we see new statues.
Well, this is our history, and we cherish and respect our history. So, and it's important, and that's what we see. It's still important today, as we see how people are trying to protect it with sandbags.
Now we're driving to the northwest suburbs, the areas which have either taken fire tiles. Cold wind whipping through this neighborhood. This is a school, a kindergarten. I can see the playground here. But all around, you just listen to the plastic. That's where windows used to be. These balconies were ripped off, windows shattered. This was one of the neighborhoods hit when they're all living. And there's been another siren, and people are running past us. They're fearing there's going to be another strike. Let me just see if we can speak to this woman. Ina, and do you live in this neighborhood? Were you here the day when it was attacked?
I was here with my son when it all happened at 8:05. It was just 2 or 3 minutes. It was all lots of noise. The windows and doors were damaged. The walls were cracked. Now there's no gas, there's no water, there's only volunteers are helping. It's very dangerous now.
It's very dangerous? You don't feel safe?
She needs to run now to the bomb shelter.
Is there a warning?
Зараз тривога, да?
Tривога, да. More and more fortifications. First, it was the mounds of white sandbags. Then, it was of tires. And today, for the first time, we're seeing bricks. The barriers getting ever higher, ever thicker. And now what are we looking at? Oh, and now we see damage here in this neighborhood. The bus stop, glass shattered, balconies torn from the buildings. And this is Kyiv. Here's another resident. Hello. What's your name?
Mikhail.
Were you shocked when your building was hit?
Не спів, розумієте? От вискочив сюди, на низ, тоді як подивився.
I didn't have time for that. I ran out outside and I walked around and saw the damage inside the flat. The doors fell off, the
bad full of everything.
Достав пляшки горілку. Самогонки. Самогонки достав.
I took a bottle of vodka, of Varilka, and I poured myself a little glass, sat down on a chair, had one. It got a bit better. I poured myself another one. Then I started cleaning up all the mess.
Це такі справи, так що.
So that's what it is. And if everyone runs away from Kyiv, who's going to stay to defend it?
Польща був Байден. Він так, розумієте, приїхав покрасуватися. Він не приїхав, не сказав.
I was really frankly ashamed when Biden came to Poland yesterday just to show off. He didn't come to say, we're giving you this, this and this. He just came to show off. I was really frankly ashamed. Simple as that.
Погане, соромно.
And this lady has been listening to us. Hello?
Я поетеса, я Олена Лева. Я хотіла іздаватися.
Well, I'm a poet, Olena Leva, is my name, and I was going to be published, and there I was speaking to the editor-in-chief, and then next day the war started. I could never imagine that we'll have a war with Russia, because we have so many cases when the mother is living here and the daughter got married in Russia. We have 4 million of Ukrainians there, which is a lot, but they have been misinformed. They don't believe what's happening, and when all of it is over, we'll, like, bad peace is better than good war.
What a thing to say. A bad peace is better than a good war. And in this war, Mariupol is now a place that most of you, our listeners, have heard about and know about. This strategic southern port city is said to have been wiped off the map by incessant Russian shelling. And it's not the only one. To the north of Kyiv, close to the Russian and Belarusian border, lies Chernihiv, an ancient city known for its stunning churches. It's a city, like Mariupol, cursed by geography. It lies on the approach to Kyiv. I asked the mayor of Chernihiv, Vladislav Atroshenko, about the Russian assault on his city.
Місто зруйноване бомбардуванням.
The city is destroyed by the perimeter of the city. The city is currently surrounded and is in operational encirclement. The place where we started our conversation is the place of the attack by a cruise missile. The Russians launched cruise missile targeting the city council twice.
Mayor Atroshenko, we heard from Russia today that the Ministry of Defense says they will drastically reduce military activity in Kyiv as well as in Chernihiv. Is this good news for your city?
Дійсно, я підтверджую, що
If the practice and long experience of relations between Ukraine and Russia were such that you could trust at least one word by the Russians, this would be good news. But I want to know that it was only yesterday when inhuman artillery shelling of several residential areas of the city took place, where about 35 people were hospitalized, where people lost their legs and some people were killed. And often the Russians say one thing, but a different thing actually happens. Only time will show how much truth is in those words. We are treating those words very cautiously at the moment.
таким сумним конкурентом.
It's been more than a month. Chernihiv was one of the first targets for Russian forces as they tried to advance toward Kyiv. You and your colleagues must be exhausted.
Of course, everyone is tired. We do not count the days. All days are working days. We are solving many primitive organizational issues which we were never dealing with during peaceful times. For example, I have never thought that as a city mayor I will have to look for refrigerators to keep bodies there because mortuaries could not feed them all. I have never thought that as a city mayor I will have to look for additional carpenter brigades to make coffins. I also have not thought that I will have to look for places to bury the dead because the cemetery at the outskirts of Chernihiv, where the burials usually take place, is on the front line between the Russian and the Ukrainian forces, so we cannot bury people there.
A mayor who builds coffins and buries the dead, the mayor of Chernihiv in the north of Ukraine, Vladislav Atroshenko. Well, this announcement from Russia that they would drastically reduce military operations around Kyiv and Chernihiv, even though we're waiting for it to happen, seems to have come out of the negotiations. And when I spoke to the deputy head of President Zelensky's office earlier today, he Kyiv told me that he thought the negotiations had definitely moved forward. He said that the talks in Istanbul were the first time that instead of giving ultimatums and red lines, that he believes the Russian side was listening to the Ukrainian side. But he also said that Ukraine wouldn't, in his words, trade any single inch of territory. And that is going to be the biggest of the obstacles to any kind of deal between Ukraine and Russia. Because one would have to ask, you don't have to be a military expert or a political analyst, that having mounted this massive special military operation, as President Putin calls it, it's very hard to imagine that whatever territory he seizes, particularly in the south and east, he'll be ready to pull out of.
Lisa Detective in Kyiv, much more from Lise coming up in the second half of our program here on NewsHour.
Since Viagra became available almost 25 years ago, it's had an impact on millions of sex lives.
It's for the marriage, the relationship, the partnership.
It's validating.
I could leave it, I suppose.
It's still a roll of the dice.
I'm Anna Sale, host of Death, Sex, and Money, and our new series is Hard, where we tell the story of Viagra and how it changed sex forever.
I think that if men had more realistic expectations for their penises, we have a lot less distress.
Listen wherever you get podcasts. WNYC supporters include the Morgan Library and Museum, on view this winter, Holbein, Capturing Character, Gwendolyn Brooks, A Poet's Work and Community, and Woody Guthrie, People Are the Song. Learn more at themorgan.org.
WNYC, independent journalism in the public interest. 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation. This is NewsHour, live from the BBC with me, Tim Franks. A not altogether random fact for you now. No Prime Minister in Pakistan's history has seen out a full term, and on Thursday the members of Parliament in Islamabad will begin a no-confidence debate on the current PM, Imran Khan. The former cricketer was elected in 2018, promising to bring pride, economic stability and a clampdown on corruption to his country. Now, though, the parliamentary politics look distinctly difficult for him. The BBC's Farhat Javed Rabbani is in our Islamabad bureau. How much peril is the Prime Minister in?
I think it would be wrong if we say that he's perhaps facing one of the most crucial moments in his political career. There is a no-confidence motion from the joint opposition in the parliament. His allies are leaving him, and if that was not enough, there are many in his own party who are now ready to vote against him. So it all started earlier this month when a joint opposition with 162 seats in the parliament decided to table a no-confidence motion, and they needed 172 votes to get the motion passed. The opposition said that most of the parliamentarians do not trust Imran Khan due to his failed policies, which have brought the economy and foreign policy of the country to a standstill. Khan denied. Khan has clearly lost the majority in the parliament. One of his biggest allies, M2M party, announced today that they are leaving Khan and that they will vote against him.
From what I've been reading and hearing, there seem to be, and you mentioned a couple of them, three big things that have been said against him in terms of management of the economy, the rate of inflation, his relationship with the armed forces, and as you mentioned, foreign policy. Just in terms of the economy, I mean, all governments, all prime ministers say that they want to improve the economy. What's his record?
So, what Khan was relying on promises like boosting the economy. He promised that he would ensure that the country's economy works for the poor. He said that he would end corruption and provide employment to the people. Now, 4 years later, inflation in Pakistan is the highest of any country in South Asia, and citizens are struggling to make ends meet as the price of essential goods is rising to unprecedented levels. And in the meantime, public support for Khan is also eroding.
Now, the army has always had an outside role in Pakistani politics. What's going on there with his relations with the armed forces?
So Imran Khan came to power in 2018, and he has been ruling the country with much ease, with no big trouble, until last year when he developed differences with Pakistan's powerful military over the appointment of the chief of the intelligence agency, ISI. Now, Khan wanted to keep the general he thought was favorable to his government. Army
he didn't want that because he said that he would have to do all these routine postings and transfers. By the end of it, it was army chiefs who won the battle. But since then, Imran Khan and his government have been under a lot of pressure. It has been facing a lot of trouble. And at the same time, opposition had long been accusing military of helping Imran Khan win the election in 2018. It's an allegation that the military has been denying. It still says that it does not interfere in politics, but many analysts believe that Imran Khan has now lost the support of the military that he used to enjoy just, a few months ago. And that is one reason that his government is in such a position now.
The BBC's Farhad Javed Rabbani speaking to us from Islamabad, Iran. Facebook has often stood accused of pushing content which is hateful or hurtful. Now a London-based advocacy group, Global Witness, has produced a new report saying that the company pushes people who express skepticism about climate change policies or indeed the man-made origins of climate change. It pushes those Facebook users towards increasingly extreme climate disinformation. David Lee is leader of the Digital Threats Campaign at Global Witness.
We wanted to investigate how climate disinformation was spreading on Facebook, and what we discovered was that Facebook users that showed a bit of an interest in climate skepticism, or maybe a little bit vulnerable to climate disinformation, are being driven towards more and often more extreme climate disinformation. We conducted an investigation where we set up a number of different dummy accounts, and we got them to like an individual page, one of which was one that had climate disinformation on, and another account which liked the IPCC, kind of a very, very reputable source of information about climate. And we found that these two accounts had entirely different experiences online, like split-screen experiences. So the account that liked the climate disinformation was just more climate disinformation.
Right, and I suppose that you, in a sense, you might not think that too surprising that people who like, follow a certain type of politics are often pushed towards more of that particular political viewpoint. But you were saying that it was people who were sort of mildly climate skeptic were pushed towards much more extreme stuff. So give me an example of both what's sort of mildly skeptical and what then was seen as being sort of much more hardline disinformation.
The account that we named Jane, so this was the kind of vulnerable to climate disinformation account, she just liked a single page. So she liked a page called Net Zero Watch, which, has got some climate disinformation on. But the issue was less kind of the page itself and more the content of the pages that she was then recommended. So immediately a whole host of other pages came up that she was to go and like, and on those we saw some really quite extreme content, so some of which had outright conspiracy theories. We saw other things describing climate activists as being completely crazy, so really quite extreme content, as well as a lot of distract and delay content, stuff that suggests that things that are happening to mitigate climate breakdown shouldn't be, and to try and tease out to stop that from happening.
Facebook do say, and we've had a statement from them today, we combat climate change misinformation by connecting people to reliable information in many languages from leading organisations, and we use a combination of AI, human review and input from partners, including fact checkers, to address problematic content, to flag it as warning labels and stop it or try and limit its distribution. So they say that, I guess it's a familiar argument from Facebook that we can't stop everything at source, but we can do all that we can do to try and limit its spread.
Yeah, absolutely, and we contacted them as well with our investigation. The piece that you mentioned at the very beginning about them directing the users towards good climate content, we were really interested in that with our investigation, but unfortunately we found that only a third of the posts that we saw of climate disinformation were actually flagged, and it was really sporadic when our user was actually directed to the climate centre, directed to good climate information. I think we've now given these platforms, including Facebook, enough time to regulate themselves, and they've shown time and time again that you know, even with the best intentions as they might have, they're not up to the job. So we're calling on governments to step in and regulate these companies and stop them from shaping our realities in these divisive ways that they're threatening to derail our fight against climate change, as well as, you know, a whole host of other problems around the world. Right now, there's a really important piece of legislation going through the EU called the Digital Services Act, and that it requires platforms to do audits and risk assessments that include climate disinformation in particular. And other countries, particularly the US, really need to follow suit as well.
Ivy Lee from the Global Witness Advocacy Group. You're listening to News Hour with me, Tim Franks. Much more to come. So, Rick, thanks for being here.
Distribution of the BBC World Service News Hour in the United States is made possible by American Public Media, producer and distributor of award-winning public radio content, engaging audiences, creating meaningful experiences, and fostering conversations. APM American Public Media, with support from Progressive Insurance, protecting small businesses with specialized coverages for commercial vehicles. More at progressivecommercial.com.
On the next Brian Blair Show, what is it about the Soviet Union that Vladimir Putin is so nostalgic for? Is it just the power of ruling an empire? Is it more than that? We'll get a perspective from Nina Khrushcheva, foreign affairs professor at the New School